Hello, everybody. I'm Sean Reynolds from Sports and about to be joined by Ken Weeb from the Winnipeg Free Press. Together, we are Kenny and Renny. This is the Kenny and Renny post-game show. No, it's not the post-game show. It is the Day 2 garbage bag show. A day after Day 2, Renny was busy flying and taking care of Game 1 of the Dallas Stars and Edmonton Oilers yesterday. So we're going to get to it today because we think there's a lot of juice to squeeze out of that orange when it comes to the season-ending avails and Day 2 conversations with people like Cole Perfetti, Gabe Vilardi, and of course head coaches Scott Arniel and Kevin Cheveldayoff. I know a guy. Hey, you need a good roof? I know a guy. North End Rick, you go get a hold of that guy. You need a great, I know some guys, Frankie and the boys. You need a guy to break down some of the most important issues facing the Winnipeg Jets heading into the offseason. I know a guy too. You know that guy as well. He's the guy with the best music in the business, folks. And here he comes. Mr. Kenneth Weeb, you were there when everything was being broken down yesterday. We'll try and get to the vast majority of what happened. I think the best place to start is with Scott Arniel. Now, let's isolate what he had to say on the podium alongside Kevin Cheveldayoff. What were your takeaways from him? This is just kind of your chance if you want to drill into specifics of what he said, go for that. But I'd also kind of like to get the idea of the job you thought that he did this year, some of the things that he talks about going forward. Just dig into Scott Arniel's end of season avail.
Yeah, Sean, I think it's layered and complex. I think the first thing that stood out was the gratitude element near the end of the 50 minutes that he was at the podium with Kevin Cheveldayoff for 49 minutes and change. I mean, Scott Arniel was asked about that first year back behind the bench as a head coach in his hometown, and yeah, that was also funny. Yes. Indeed, Stephen Brown, Scott Arniel thanked Kenny for the softballs.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
It was noticed. Anyways. Don't let him derail you, Ken. Don't let him derail you.
It was funny. Yeah,
it's the end of the season, but
that was funny. Yeah,
be done. You and I aren't quite done yet.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, I mean, there's occasionally questions the coach doesn't like, so that's part of the gig. But yeah, I mean, Scott Arniel, again, yeah, the narrative last year around this time when the hiring was about to be announced, some people stood by a pretty poor take that it was Scott Arniel just getting the job because he had familiarity with True North, dating back to his time as a captain of the Manitoba Moose and eventually an assistant coach and then the head coach. But Scott Arniel showed incredibly well in his first season behind the bench in an NHL in a head coaching capacity since 2012. Over a decade he waited, and as I wrote about in the Free Press today, that time that Scott Arniel spent rebranding himself, learning from other coaches, rebranding the Scott Arniel brand, that brand ended up being pretty impressive in terms of his ability to be a leader of men, to be a tactician, to be a guy who can make in-game adjustments. So, yeah, I mean, I would say that it was a pretty good first year. It was an excellent first year for Scott Arniel back behind the bench. But the thing that stood out, Sean, in my long-winded way of getting around to it, was that Scott Arniel won't be satisfied till there's a parade at Portage and Main. And that is something that would be music to the ears of, some of those people who didn't love the hiring at the time, those vocal folks on social media and other places. So the fact that Scott Arniel accomplished a lot with this group. He helped them get over a pretty significant hurdle. But the fact that Scott Arniel was not behind the bench instead of Pete DeBoer in that Western Conference final of Game 1 against the Edmonton Oilers, that bothered him and bothers him, and it's been keeping him up at night. And the search for solutions is something that will be driving Scott Arniel, his entire coaching staff, and every player in this organization until they show up for training camp in September. And so that was my biggest takeaway of everything. And I think it's pretty clear that Scott Arniel knows that he pushed this group far this year, but he also knows that they need to have another impressive summer of homework and study. And they know there's still another level they need to reach in order to get those other 10 wins that they fell short of this year.
You know what I liked about it is he's raw. He's honest. He's not trying to BS you, right? He comes in here and into this avail, and he's not saying he's got all the answers. He's basically saying, listen, I'm drilling down and I'm figuring this out as well. And I will have an answer for you come the fall time, right? Is what I'm hearing from him in this. This is a guy who came in, took over a team that had a real shot at being the President's Trophy winner last year. So where do you go from there? Well, the only where you go is like up from fourth place to third, second, or first. And what do you got to do? You have to captivate your team with your message. That whole 5 to 10% better thing, it's one of those things that, like, guys will say that at the gym or coaches will say it, to kids. And if they give it 5 to 10 more percent, it's easy to say that. It's hard to get teams to buy in completely and wholly to the idea that, okay, like, I'm just going to do what I've been doing this whole time. Guys like Mark Scheifele, who have been spending his whole life giving 110%. And basically saying to them, I need more. And that's what your challenge is. And everyone kind of rising to that challenge. You hear so much about coaches that lose the room, right? That's the last thing that happens. Players don't pay attention. I was just talking, I just was at an avail with Pete DeBoer, who talked about that losing streak that the team went on at the end of the year was actually kind of the shock they needed to wake up to play properly for the playoffs. And at one point he said this, Kenny said, I don't know what it is about this group, and it could be from the coach, that they need that sometimes they need to have their backs against the wall to get going. But what you hear is that even a team that is still going, that's still playing, that is up 1-0 in the conference final, is a team that is not completely and entirely bought in at all times. Talk about coaches that lose the room. Scott Arniel was the antithesis of that this year. He had complete and utter buy-in. He not lost the room. He found single last inch of that room. He found the things that motivated these players. He found the things that brought them together. And you know what? We'll get into this a little bit more because it kind of bleeds into Kevin Cheveldayoff territory and kind of the whole idea of the Winnipeg Jets and who they are. But the love that this team had for each other this year that you saw on display in Game 6, that is the true strength of the Winnipeg Jets. They're a family, they're a brotherhood, and you don't have that if you don't have a strong figurehead that's working to keep everybody together. So what you are trying to sell Winnipeg Jets organization, and I do believe that's the Winnipeg Jets organization, that comes right from Mark Chipman at the very top, that this is how they sell people. And staying in Winnipeg is the reason why guys like Vladislav Nemesnikov and Niederreiter and Connor Hellebuck and Mark Scheifele and the list goes on and on stay. It's what they're trying to sell. Nick Ehlers on right now. It's what they'll try to sell Kyle Connor on and so forth, is the idea that this is a family and what we can offer you is love and complete and total support, the way that a true family would. You have to have the right people in place to be that. That was Scott Arniel. Scott Arniel was the patriarch of this family. He stepped in. It may not be easy to do that when you've got a guy like Rick Bowness, who kind of started this whole wave for them, to have your one dad leave and, hey, a new dad step in. Anyone who's had stepdads before that, they ended up with it. I don't know if they loved them right off the bat. Sometimes it can be tricky when you switch things over. But I take a look at this and I see a guy who knew how to push all the right buttons, who brought everyone together, who created that family that makes this team strong. And what I see, Ken, is a guy who is clearly zoned in on, I know the areas where we can get better further. And that's all you want from your coach as a player is solutions. If you give me something I can do to elevate my game and elevate our team, we'll do it. What I hear when I hear Scott Arniel talk is a coach that his players can very easily say, all right, you got us to this point, Scott. What comes next? You say it's that. He talked about how he's going to reach out to them in a couple of weeks with those messages. That message, I'm very confident will be received extremely well and will be applied extremely well. And I honestly think where this Jets team is now, I don't know if they win the President's Trophy again next year, and I don't know necessarily that they take any further steps in the playoffs, but what I'm fully convinced of, that I think most analysts, and Ken, you and I were convinced of this last year, a lot of analysts missed. A lot of analysts thought the Jets were going to fall out of the playoffs. I think the Jets have reached that place under Scott Arniel, that they are that kind of one of those constant teams, kind of like the Carolina Hurricanes, that you know they're going to be there. You know they're not going to be dropping out of the playoffs next year. And, hey, bookmark this, folks, because if you want to come back and burn me and I get this totally wrong next year, fine. I have zero concerns of the Winnipeg Jets falling out of the playoff race next year. This is a locked-in team, messaging on brand, motivation on brand. Pete DeBoer, again, shoehorned the Winnipeg Jets into the conversation after the game last night to shout out what a tough team they were to play. Everyone remembers what Pete DeBoer said about Scott Arniel. He thought should be winning the Jack Adams Trophy in a runaway. This is a dream return to the NHL for a guy that maybe wouldn't have been given an opportunity to play that role anywhere else other than Winnipeg. What a coup by Chevy to bring him in, and what a performance by Scott Arniel when there's probably not a little room for error in the second chance that he was given.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, the other part too, I mean, last year, Sean, when we were breaking these things down, it was pretty clear what the Jets needed to do. They needed to trust their structure, and they needed to improve their special teams. So what did they do this year? Well, they trusted their structure a lot more in the playoffs when things got tough. And they also did a better job. I mean, their power play went from the bottom third to first overall. Now, it struggled in the playoffs at times, and that's true, and that's something they'll need to work on for sure. And their penalty kill went from the bottom third into the middle third. So yes, special teams. I think the penalty kill is something that is going to continue to need to improve, and that's something that Dean Chenoth will be tackling, with vigor in the offseason for sure. But the Jets' power play was something that was outstanding during the year, almost 33+% for the majority of the season. Yes, it ended up dipping down the stretch after Four Nations and in the playoffs at times, and it needs to be better. Because they were outscored 7-3 on the power play by the Dallas Stars in a very tight series. But in terms of structure and buy-in and all of those things that are really difficult, Sean, for a head coach transition, yes, you have their attention, but to be able to get the buy-in from the high-end players, from Mark Scheifele, from Kyle Connor, that has a huge trickle-down effect. And again, Paul Maurice used to always say, the Jets know what they look like when they're at their best. This is very simple. The Jets of this current iteration under Scott Arniel know what they look like. They know what the template is. When they are at their best, they think they can beat anybody in the NHL. The players have said it countless times, including Adam Lowry, reiterating that, and Gabe Vilardi saying it yesterday too, Sean. I mean, he said we basically felt like we had the team that should have been right there, had as good a chance as anybody, were the words that he used. And, Gabe Vilardi isn't someone that's throwing out false bravado at any point here. He was being very honest. He had, this is a guy who hadn't been to the second round or played in a game 7 in his career before, this year. So, I mean, he's watched a lot of hockey in his day. So, yeah, Scott Arniel did an outstanding job. Having said all that, as proud as he is of the group, he knows they're not going to be satisfied until they quench the thirst and go farther and, get back to a conference final, get to their first Stanley Cup final. That will be a driving force for him. I like that he didn't just throw something out there and said, it's going to be this, it's got to be that, it's got to be competing harder. I mean, this team competed very well this year. They showed incredible character under, incredibly difficult circumstances at Game 6 and at various points throughout the season. They had great leadership from the top. Scott Arniel did a great job, but the facts are now that the job is going to be difficult, even more difficult. It's easier in a lot of regards, but to get those next 10 victories is tough because everybody's trying to improve. Everybody's trying to improve their roster. Everybody's trying to improve their structure. Everyone's trying to improve their discipline. And make life easier on their goaltender. Everyone's looking for an edge in special teams. Everybody's looking for an edge in analytics and in things that they can apply here, there, and everywhere. So, but yeah, I mean, the Jets are in a good place. They've got a very smart coaching staff throughout. They've got a good roster, and they're going to have to augment that roster, Sean. And I mean, that's I think also one of the biggest takeaways both you and I have. I mean, we saw what Dallas did in Game 1 in rallying against the Oilers. The Dallas Stars are a deep hockey team. The Jets had a deep hockey team, but the Dallas Stars, I think, are a bit deeper, and that's one of the reasons they're still playing, and the Jets are looking for answers.
Let's switch over to Kevin Cheveldayoff and just kind of take it away. Again, you can be specifically about what he said, but we need to get into his role in, because people are going to want to talk about trade deadline. They're going to want to talk about last offseason. They're going to want to talk about what we should, or what he should be doing heading to the offseason. Take it away.
Yeah. I mean, I thought Kevin was, spoke passionately, was obviously supportive of the job that Scott did. And I mean, he hired him, so you understand why he had confidence in him, but this is the thing. I mean, Scott Arniel showed why Kevin Cheveldayoff had confidence in him, and if he didn't do the job, then he wouldn't be speaking that way about him. At the same time, Kevin was very frank in terms of wanting players that want to be here. Yes, he shed some. He was a little bit more revealing also than in previous times. Letting it be known that he had just had a visit on Monday with Andre Rufner, the agent for Nikolai Ehlers, that lasted 2 hours. I mean, that was. We don't hear a lot about negotiations, but the fact that the Jets are openly talking extensively about, their highest profile unrestricted free agent, I think is an important thing. If there wasn't something to talk about, you don't have a 2-hour meeting just for show at this point of the season, Sean.
Can I interject for just 1 second?
Sure.
Yeah, I just want to say what I think has changed. Like, put your finger on the difference in what you're talking about what he talks about now compared to years past. There was always such a, iron curtain up, a lead curtain, let's say. You couldn't even x-ray through this darn thing to kind of see what was going on behind the scenes. What I like about this here, Ken, is I think, and we'll get into it, but I think both you and I think, I've said it like this. I think there's more of a chance that Nick Ehlers is gone that he returns. I don't know that it is, the scales are entirely tipped in one direction, but I think it's more likely it's over 50% he leaves compared to probably about, let's say it's 55% he leaves, 45% he's coming back. What I like about what I hear from Kevin Cheveldayoff, it's not the old days where the lead curtain was up and you just aren't getting a peek behind there and we just don't talk about it because you're almost afraid of how your audience A is going to react, or B, the kind of, maybe blame that they will assign to you if you fail to get that deal done. What Kevin Cheveldayoff did very openly was said, we want him to be a Winnipeg Jet for life. That's what we're going to try for. And if it doesn't work out, we're going to evolve and we're going to move on, which to me is just an understanding of him acknowledging he may leave. And that's the way this is going to go here. And if he does leave, we're going to find a way to figure something out on the other side of this. And I think that is a level of honesty that Kevin Cheveldayoff is now, I feel it started switching once Bones arrived here in Winnipeg, and he's just getting better and better and better at it. But I think Kevin Cheveldayoff is less worried about what the media is going to say about these things, what the fan base is going to say about these things. I think he's got his plan and he's going to execute his plan the best he can. And he's confident in that plan. So he's confident now to tell you, yeah, we're going to try and get Nick Ehlers and he may not stay. And if he doesn't, we're going to figure it out. I think is a level of openness and accountability that shows evolution in Kevin Cheveldayoff. And it's refreshing to hear it at this point.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it reminded me a little bit. I don't think it's the first time we've heard it. I think it reminded me of around the Patrick Laine time, right? I mean, he was a little bit more open around those times as well. But yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely welcome for sure. And again, if the Jets can't sign Nikolai Ehlers, they can't act like it's the end of the world. I mean, no offense to the player, but I mean, some players leave in free agency. I mean, that's a fact of life. The Jets aren't going to fold up the franchise and think that they're not a competitive team if that's what happens. Now, of course, they'd like to bring him back and re-sign him and have him spend his whole career here. But, again, I like the fact that, he's a little bit more revealing in terms of talking about the meetings that are happening. I mean, he's not telling us what the offers are, and we don't expect him to. But the fact that the Jets are making a significant pitch, trying to convince him to stick around, is important. Now, to me, if I'm Nikolai Ehlers, you've waited this long, you probably wait till July 1st to see what else is out there. That's not to say you close the door on the Jets, but you only get really one big shot at this with the cap going up. So again, it would be natural for him to want to listen to what else is out there, and see where things go. But I liked what I heard. I mean, in terms of the deadline, Kevin made it clear that this was not a Brock Nelson or bust trade deadline for them. We know that. We know they kicked the tires and tried to make deals on a number of centers. I mean, and everyone's saying that Kevin.
How many can you name, Ken? How many players can you say that they had conversations about?
Well, I mean, we know it's multiple players. I mean, there were some trade dead guys who had trade protection that were not interested. I mean, I don't we don't have the specifics, but we know there's multiple players in that category. There were other players that the Jets thought were maybe on the board at one point and taken off the board. But again, these are things that, for a general manager, he doesn't want to be listing off a bunch of things that sound like excuses. So, but again, we know this wasn't just Kevin Cheveldayoff missing out on Brock Nelson and then saying, well, screw it, we're out of here. We're not trying to acquire anybody else. Having said that, I mean, Kevin Cheveldayoff made it pretty clear he wasn't just going to trade for somebody for the sake of spending the $6 million if he wasn't a fit in that, again, and you understand it's not a move for making a move type of scenario. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, I mean, would he have liked to have brought in another scorer based on the fact that the team didn't score enough in the playoffs? Yeah, I mean, of course. I mean, if you could do that over again, maybe you would, but there just weren't a ton of available options at that time. And, I think that the other part that, again, our job is to sort of read between the lines, Sean, right? So when he says earlier in the year, maybe when you thought you might have wanted to make a deal, but you didn't have the accrued cap space, maybe that's a nod to, again, I'm not going to say, he didn't say it was Granlund, and I'm not saying it was Granlund either, but at the time when Jim Nill made the preemptive strike, the Jets didn't have quite as big a window of cash for, acquiring someone like Mikael Granlund. So anyways, and it's super interesting, right? Granlund's super quiet in the first round, played great against the Jets. Also had a huge shot yesterday at a big goal. So you and I debated, Sean. I think we landed on probably not the best fit, but again, now he goes into, you never know how guys are going to fit. He's fit well with Dallas. There's no doubt that all of Cody Ceci, Mikael Granlund, and Mikko Rantanen all make Dallas a better and deeper team. So I mean, the fact of the matter is the Jets are going to look at either signing a 2C or trading for a 2C this summer. Which way they go, who knows? What we know, Sean, from being around Vegas last year at the draft, the Jets, definitely were, I don't know how far the conversations went. They were definitely interested in someone like Connor McMichael, who was a up-and-coming second-line center potential type of person. When it came to the Rutger McGroarty deal, that never got to where they wanted it to get to. Connor McMichael ends up having a huge season with the Washington Capitals. They're probably thrilled that they held on to him. But that's the type of guy the Jets would love to have, like an emerging talent. But Sean, guess what? All of those emerging talents, none of those teams want to give up those players. So
right.
That's what makes a deal difficult. But definitely, we know what the Jets are looking for in terms of adding, signing their own guys, extensions for Kyle Connor, extensions for Adam Lowry. We'll dig into all these things. New RFA deals for Dylan Samberg, Gabe Vilardi, Morgan Barron, probably Rasmus Kupari. But again, it's not just a matter of keeping what they have in-house. They need to upgrade their second line, and that job becomes more difficult if Nikolai Ehlers is potentially moving out the door. Now you're looking for at least one player and probably two in order to maintain that place in the upper echelon of the Western Conference and in the Central Division.
I wanted to bring up this comment right here from Stephen Braun, who says, Arnie standing up for Chevy by talking about how many teams wanted the good players was interesting. Not just the good players, but just the competition angle of this. So I touched a little bit on this the last show, so we don't need to go too deep. But I called this early in the season. Too many teams involved, too many involved with thinking they had a shot of making the playoffs, so they weren't dealing at the trade deadline. Too many of the teams who are out can't be kicking the can down the road. There weren't a lot of suitors, and I was thinking about this and how to explain this, because there's a whole bunch of people in our timeline and in the chat room here for a lot of the year who have kind of like talked about this and the $6 million in dead cap space. And, you know, like, I'm going to tell you this right now. I can tell you with 1,000% certainty, you can put it on your faith in Renny or your trust of me going forward. But the Winnipeg Jets weren't trying to save money in this situation. The Winnipeg Jets wanted to spend this. You heard Kevin Cheveldayoff talk about it. You don't spend cap space just to spend cap space. It needs to be the proper fit. And he talked about the idea and an acknowledgement that the Jets felt that going out and getting Tyler Toffoli last year, that did not work. They're admitting that. They're admitting the mistake. This was not the right player to get in there in the end. And hey, a lot of you are going to be happy with this, because this was a lot of the conversation that was happening in the chat room last year. But in the end, the cost of that was playoff development time for a player like Cole Perfetti. This is a scenario in which, from what I hear and from what I think, and everyone, like, I think this is why I think it's so important to be honest and be critical when criticism is deserved. Like I've done so many times on this show, that's earned me the nickname Heel Renny or Red Renny or Dark Renny or whatever the kind of things that have been said about me when I've been critical of the Jets. I think it's important to do that when you believe those things. So in moments like this, where there's going to be people coming at me and saying, oh, you're doing PR for the team, that I can point to the fact that I've been extremely hard on the team in the past, because I've believed in those situations, because I believe what I'm saying in those situations. And I believe what I said in the past when I talked about the room and when I talked about the culture and where that culture was at. And then that pays off when a new coach comes in and says the culture needs to be turned around and those things. So take it for what you will, but my take on this is Kevin Cheveldayoff went out and tried to get what he could. Now, if there's an error in Kevin Cheveldayoff not making this team deeper, to me, that error was made last summer. And even then, we know that UFAs are hard to get to come to Winnipeg. You don't think it's hard? Point to me the UFA that they brought here that was easy to bring here. Point it out, like give me the tangibles. Show me why it's so easy to get a UFA here and easy to solve that problem. Maybe what they needed to do, Ken, was throw a ridiculous amount of money at Sean Monahan so he didn't leave, because clearly they were onto something with Sean Monahan. Yep. Sean Monahan went and was a point-per-game player and helped lead the resurgence that we saw from one of the teams that a lot of people would have thought would have had guys available at the trade deadline in the Columbus Blue Jackets. Didn't happen because they were right in it that whole time. But maybe not locking him down was the major problem. Maybe you needed to overpay. I don't know that was the case or not the case. Maybe you need to just do something ridiculous like pay Sean Monahan $1.5 million more a year than Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuck just to get the guy to stay so that you can solve that problem. But then if you want to play that game, you need to start rolling into the idea of how that affects a locker room and how jealousy can creep into that and the kind of issues that can happen there. If you get your two main pillars in Mark Scheifele and Connor Hellebuck and lock those guys down and then start handing out contracts way bigger than theirs. So this isn't that as easy as people made it seem. This wasn't the Jets sitting on their hands. The Jets went out. They tried to get players they thought were going to be there. And I say Braden Shen out loud is who I think was one of those players that they thought they had a chance of getting. And in the end, that guy was out there and then he got pulled off the market. And you can see why, because the St. Louis Blues got to a place no one thought they would get to. It took one of the best runs of hockey from any team in the NHL this year after the Four Nations to get them there, as they ended up tied in the playoffs and won on a tiebreaker to get into the playoffs. Like, that's how thin that margin was. And that's what gets Braden Shen taken off the table, is that late run in that situation. So That's a player. Ken, you and I have batted around a couple others. We know Brock Arniel said no to come here. Kevin Cheveldayoff tried to solve this ongoing 2C problem. Is something that we talked about for years. Ken, to me, maybe the biggest, most critical moment the Jets not solving the 2C problem was when they traded Chris Thorburn and swapped their first round pick with another one to send to Vegas so that they could hold on to Tobias Enstrom, which he stayed and they went to the conference final that year. But the pick that they switched ended up being Nick Suzuki. That sure could have been, and it's like I'm cutting out here. Ken, I don't know if you can hear me or not.
I can.
But that was, maybe you would have solved it way back then. I'm not giving a blanket free pass for Kevin Cheveldayoff to say, there's not things he could have done in the past, solve these problems and have gotten out of this predicament. But anyone who thought it was just as simple as walking out this year at the trade deadline and grabbing a guy and moving on with it, it wasn't there. I'd said it early. You could see it setting up. It was not there. UFA for the Jets, it is not there. It has never been there. Maybe one day they'll bring in a guy, but it was not there. Maybe it was Sean Monahan. If you want to go down that road, that could be the critical error that Kevin Cheveldayoff made. But I'm not. We've heard too much, Ken. We've listened too much behind the scenes. We had too many conversations about this. And the fact of the matter is, say it like this then. Who's the player that got traded that the Jets should have got? Because you can't go to the players that didn't get traded, right? All you people out there saying they should have gone and got this guy, you should have gone and got that guy. Everyone was looking for these players. So the fact that those players didn't move meant that either they weren't going anywhere or the price for them was so outlandish that they were not moving those players. So point to me to the player that got moved or that didn't get moved that the Jets could have lured out, or then point to me to the players that did move and go to other teams that the Jets could have got or should have got ahead of the teams that got them. And I don't think, it's an exercise. I'm asking you to take part in here, folks. If you disagree with what I'm saying, find me the guy. But if you're just throwing out random names and they don't make sense, you're just wasting my time in this situation here. Kevin Cheveldayoff tried. The Winnipeg Jets tried. The market was not the market to go pick guys up this year. That's how it shook out.
Yeah, and too, someone mentioned Jared McCann in the chat. And again, Jared McCann, I think, is someone that the Jets were sniffing around on. I think he would fall into that category of one of the players that was maybe pulled off. Because, yes, he played more wing than center this year with the emergence of Shane Wright. And Chandler Stevenson coming in, but again, he's a good two-way player that has some offensive upside. Skates well enough. I think he might be someone that now there's a managerial change in Seattle. There's going to be a coaching change. Maybe Jared McCann is someone that the Jets circle back on in the summertime. They'll obviously do an exhaustive search, but to me, that would be someone that would make some sense, Sean, given his ability to shoot the puck and score and provide some two-way play. But again, there's going to be a wide variety in things that are happening. Lots of teams trying to get better. There'll be teams that are looking to salary dump. We'll see what happens on that front. But yeah, there weren't a ton of guys that moved, and everyone's looking for the same thing. Everyone wants to upgrade their second line center job. And again, you're watching the series. Adam Henrique had a couple big goals, last round against Vegas, but he hasn't had a good year for a guy that the Jets were, in the running both to, I think, trade for last year and then to sign in the summer. I don't know that Adam Henrique would have solved the Jets second line center problem, even though I have a lot of time for the player. And again, I've covered this guy since the Memorial Cup in 2010, when he played for that incredible Windsor Spitfires team. So I've got a lot of time for him, but he hasn't had a good year, but he's having a little bit more of a rejuvenated playoff, but in a third line role, not a second line role.
I just wanted to bring this up because it's a fascinating question from Rob Somerville, who says, do the Jets still staunchly believe in supporting the draft and develop process? We seem to have a number of players in this current situation. Will any of these players be moving or moving on? This is a good question because it's a bit of a hybrid model. As Kevin Cheveldayoff pointed out, that no team has moved more draft picks than the Winnipeg Jets over that. I can't forget what the qualifier, the number of years was.
Yeah.
But clearly the Winnipeg Jets have moved move to at least a hybrid model. They do protect their guys as much as they can. Rutger McGroarty was an example of that. If you're going to move him, you're going to move him for, something that you feel you're going to get something back. That's why they have Jágr the way that they do. But the Jets, I do think when they do draft guys, they really, really buy into those guys. And it's kind of you're part of the family model now that I was talking about at the top of the show. You get brought in to that family and they stick with those players and that's how they believe they're going to get the most out of these players when it comes to developing them. But clearly the Winnipeg Jets have also landed on a place where they see their best shot at taking advantage of the core that they have now, which Kevin Cheveldayoff reiterated that he strongly believes in, that you have to use those assets to try and acquire the players that you feel you need to win right now. So I'd say it's a hybrid model. At one point, the Jets just drafted and let's see how many guys we can bring along. They've given up a number of first-round picks over the last little while and second-round picks, and all along, again, in Kevin Cheveldayoff's words, they've traded away more than any other team. Hybrid model, but they clearly don't lean on it the way that they used to. And I do think, Ken, it's the explanation of how you had, Mark Scheifele and Nick Ehlers and Kyle Connor and Josh Morrissey and go on and on and on. Patrick Laine. This team was just getting star after star after star. The star pipeline seems to have gummed up a little bit now. It's still yet to be seen what happens of Jágr and Lambert and guys like that. But I mean, Nick Ehlers going to be one of the prize picks out of UFAs this year. Mark Scheifele, legit number one center. Kyle Connor has grown into one of the best American players out there. Josh Morrissey turned into a top 5 defenseman in the NHL. Like, the Jets had a real penchant for drafting stars over and over and over again. They've now gone into the finding diamonds in the rough kind of era for where they are. And that has something to do with the fact, folks, that they're a better team. And all those guys that I talked about them drafting, they typically drafted them when they were an out of the playoffs team that had better and higher draft pick odds having to go with that. Ken, we should switch gears into some of the specific players and turn that into a continuation of the conversation having to do with Chevy and what he has ahead of him. Let's start with Adam Lowry, who talked about, you want
to wrap up the Cheveldayoff, because of the topic that you're talking about, interesting comments about Elias Solomonsson, Sean. Kevin Cheveldayoff saying, we're really praising him for the great year that he had. Yes, the injury prevented him from getting his NHL debut or making his NHL debut this year, but he made it clear that if he has a great summer, he will be the type of player that forces them into a difficult decision. And what that means is that they may have to move on from one of the experienced defensemen. The Jets right now have 7 NHLers already under contract, and Dylan Samberg is an RFA, and Hayden Fleury as a UFA is looking to stick around potentially as well. But yeah, I thought that was super interesting. Yes, I understand people say, Kevin Cheveldayoff left the door wide open for the likes of Chibrikov and Lambert last year at his exit meetings. Now those guys played some games, but they weren't regulars, but that's because they didn't win the job. And for Chibrikov himself, looked good, but he got hurt. So again, I don't think he was being disingenuous. Those guys just got outplayed by experienced players. And for Solomonsson, he's an interesting character, right? I mean, with Shen under contract for one more year, with the Pionk extension, with DeMello still having multi-years on his left on his deal, they may have to be a little bit more patient with him. But Sean, he's a guy who Scott Arniel directly compared to Dylan Samberg. They basically said they have the model in place. Yeah. The player that's going to be, marinated and then brought in to play a massive role. And I think there's a chance that, Solomonsson will either be the partner of Dylan Samberg or Josh Morrissey, within 2 years. Now, does that mean he needs more time with the Moose? That's up to Solomonsson to show in training camp. But this is a guy that they think very highly of. And that goes back to what you were talking about. Samberg, not a high profile guy, second rounder. Solomonsson is a second rounder. Both those guys basically are first round players that are second round picks. Sorry. Blake Grist, to comments about Solomonsson means nothing. They said the same about Heinola, then proceeded to play Stanley 100 games. I just don't like the comparison, Blake. Sorry. I mean, Solomonsson is he's not a banger, but he's a big physical guy who plays with an edge. He's mobile. Heinola is the type of player the Jets have in abundance on the back end. Undersized, skilled defenseman. That's why there was no room for him. It wasn't that they were, having false commentary about Heinola. Heinola, unfortunately for Villy, he got hurt at an inopportune time 2 years in a row and didn't outperform the people ahead of him on the depth chart. I mean, could he have gotten more opportunity? Sure. But he also hasn't done enough to say he has to be in the lineup.
Yeah, and they didn't specifically. It's a little bit of an apples and oranges comparison, Blake, because they didn't say specifically Ville Heinola is our next Josh Morrissey or anything like that. Like, what you are seeing here is the Jets know the path for Elias Solomonsson. When it came to Ville Heinola, they saw the raw talent and they had this belief of this is what they're going to do. Right now, they've got a path that a player just walked to come in and end up being, in both Ken's and my defense, and one of the most underrated defensive players in the entire NHL. That player just walked that path, and they are seeing that those footsteps, while they are still in the snow, this guy is walking in, and the footprints are fitting perfectly where Dylan Samberg's just were. And the comments about Scott Arniel wanting to keep him around that much longer, the way that they are, the Jets know that the language within the organization, which Ken has a really, really good job of deciphering, or does a good job of deciphering. The comments they've been excited about this guy for a long time. There is ridiculous, massive belief in Elias Solomonsson. And I think clearly, Blake, if we're talking about Ville Heinola, their actions will have shown the faith that they have in Ville Heinola over the last number of years. And clearly that would be different than what they're saying, at least, about Elias Solomonsson. Okay, I want to get into conversations going forward with Kevin Cheveldayoff. Let's just start with Lowry. I don't want to go... A lot of what was said from the players is a lot of what we've heard before. We know they're a family. We know they're looking out for Mark, all these kind of things. I don't want to diminish the things that everyone was saying. Just the points that really stuck out to you, and the point about Adam Lowry wanting to be a Jet for life.
Yeah, I mean, this is no surprise. I mean, this is part of the reason he signed early last time, and it is part of the reason why, Adam Lowry, in typical Adam Lowry fashion, made it clear that he knows there are other people that will sign the deal before him, and he's not the least bit concerned about going into the last year of his deal because he wants to be a Winnipeg Jet for life. These aren't hollow, empty words. These are words that will be actionable, and you'll see when the deal gets signed. What we saw over the last, week or so, Sean, and you were on the ground for it, is also Adam Lowry's leadership has always been evident since taking over the captaincy. His willingness to include others in terms of both helping with the burden, but also, allowing other voices to be heard. Excellent. We know this. His ability to handle and lead in light of the tragedy and the death of Brad Scheifele, was just literally, all encompassing in terms of what he has brought to the table. He is what this city, province, organization that he plays for stands for. And, the Jets aren't going to allow him to go elsewhere. They want him to be their, I'm going to say Steve Yzerman, not because of a talent level, but because of leadership level. They want him to be a lifelong Jet. And I expect that to get done at some point, whether it's this summer or sometime during the course of the season.
So that's happening. We know that's going to happen. It's just a matter of time when they get it done. Here's what I'm hoping happens in that situation, Ken. The leadership that you're talking about of Adam Lowry, it's just, we've always known he was a leader since long before he wore a letter for this team. He's led it in his actions. He led it in the signing of his last contract. Here's what I hope for Adam Lowry. Guys like Blake Wheeler, guys like Brian Little were given contracts that were kind of acknowledged, almost a wink at the time, that these were guys getting overpaid for service that they had provided in the past. You and I talked about it on our podcast when we had Adam Lowry on right after he signed his last deal. Adam Lowry, in my opinion, has been getting underpaid $1.75 million a year ever since he signed that last contract. I was blown away by the contract that he signed. I think leadership is shown in a lot of ways. And Adam Lowry, when there's so many players, and nothing against players who say this, but how many players say that's up to my agent, I don't want to talk about it, blah, blah, blah. how many, you've got most players treat it like that. And Adam Lowry comes out and says, like, forget the whole thing and what it does to my leverage or whatever. I want to be a Winnipeg Jet. I want to sign early. I want to forego unrestricted free agency. And yeah, I just want to get the deal done, so I'll take less money. If there was a player in the history of the Winnipeg Jets who deserves an overpay right now, the Winnipeg Jets coming in and saying, hey, Adam, the market says that you're worth this. We just tacked on $1.5 million a year. Here you go. And that may not even be enough. Would you like to sign this? I hope that happens. I hope it happens, because I think Adam Lowry has done nothing but make sacrifices for the Winnipeg Jets and the city of Winnipeg throughout his career. I think he's sacrificed millions in the process in doing that. And I don't think there's a lot of players who can say have done that. And the players who have done it, usually it's poor negotiating on their part that had them end up in that spot. With Adam Lowry, I just think Adam Lowry is just like, let's just get the deal done. I am hoping for a Kevin Cheveldayoff walk-in overpay, even make it a stupid overpay of Adam Lowry to show him how much he means to the Winnipeg Jets and how appreciative the Winnipeg Jets are. The Jets aren't where they are right now as an organization that loves each other. If you do not have Adam Lowry leading the way in that regard, that is priceless. What he has done for the organization. Adam Lowry deserves an overpay. I sure hope this is maybe, if there was ever a take, Ken, that I thought I would like to see be right, that I can walk back later and be like, Renny told you so, this is the one. I want Adam Lowry to get overpaid. I want him to get way above market value. He deserves it. The Winnipeg Jets would still be coming out ahead money-wise by the time it's all said and done. Overpay that man. Give him his money, as the quote from Rounders goes.
Well, and then the other thing too is that, and we saw it at various points this year. I mean, we've been talking about the 2C job for a long time, and I mean, some folks say it's a decade long. I mean, that's totally inaccurate. The Jets had Paul Stastny in here. The Jets had Sean Monahan in here. The Jets had Pierre-Luc Dubois in here. So it hasn't been a decade long deal, but this has been a big question, no doubt, and they've often had to bring guys in to get them. Maybe Adam Lowry gets a longer look in that role, Sean. I mean, we'll see what happens with Mason Appleton, but I could see a scenario where, the Jets have some reconstruction. And then just going back to Gabe Vilardi for a second, Vilardi went out of his way saying he loves playing with Kyle and Mark, but he also said, doesn't matter who I play with. I mean, there could be a scenario where there's a Lowry-Vilardi combination, and maybe Cole Perfetti goes up with Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor at some point. Anyways, that's just something to think about on the bigger picture. But I mean, Lowry's going to be here for a long time, is how I see things.
Oh yeah, he will be a Jet for life. I have,
and as pointed out in the chat room, I mean, as I'll be here as long as they'll have me. I mean, that's again, this is not Adam just saying things to say the right thing. That's how he feels. He does not take his situation for granted at all. He's earned everything that he's got since joining the organization, and he has more to give.
Yeah. Okay. Anything that you need to add on Ehlers above and beyond what we've talked about?
No, I'm with you. I think your assessment is bang on. Again, door is open, but at the same time, I think that, actions, we talk about actions. I mean, Nikolai Ehlers, this is the first year he's been on the first unit out of 10 years. So, I mean, I think that there will be other teams that offer him a greater opportunity. Whether that's a greater opportunity to win or not, I mean, that's there to be debated. But again, I'm with you. I think it's more likely he is not back than he is back, but that's the thing about Ehlers. He has a little bit of an unpredictable quality to him, Sean. He is very accountable. We love talking to him. He's often, a little bit more direct than some people are post games. That sometimes gets him in a little bit of trouble. But for me, I think Ehlers is a guy who is probably going to, at least want to see what else is out there, and we'll see what happens from there. And he'll be a difficult guy to replace. That's all I want to add. The Jets need to get faster, Sean. They potentially could be losing their fastest player, so that makes the offseason job even more difficult.
We'll dive into some different players. Anything about Samberg that stands out to you?
Not really. I mean, I think this is something that, he didn't really want to get into the contract stuff, which is fine. I mean, he's the kind of guy that, he just shows up for work and does his job. And some people don't enjoy negotiating. Some people are pit bulls, Sean, and enjoy the back and forth. I think that Dylan Samberg's a guy who will be happy to get this contract complete, and I think he'll be working hard at elevating his status and continuing to work hard as being a top 4 shutdown guy. He wants to add a little bit more offense to his game. We've talked about the Slavin comparisons, and for folks who are confused, I mean, nobody's saying that Dylan Samberg is Jacob Slavin. Jacob Slavin has a long list of accomplishments well before Four Nations, when half the NHL viewership world finally paid attention to Jacob Slavin. This guy is a guy who is on Norris Trophy ballots. Dylan Samberg is not there yet, but he is a guy who is trending upward and plays that style of game. That's why we use him as a comparison. His contract, Slavin's contract, pays him north of $6 million on a long-term deal. I don't know that that Dylan Samberg's contract starts with a 6, but I do think it's more than a 4. I think it's probably in that $5 million range and could be north of that. I'm not saying it can't be 6, but especially with the cap going up, but I think it's north of 5, and I think they want to go at least 7 years, if not 8.
I would agree. I've said that's a guy who should get paid extremely well. But I've made my feeling clear on this, so I don't think I need to add much more in that. I will say this: the one thing I was a little bummed not being there, I wasn't able to ask. No one asked him about the play that led to the goal that ended that series. I think those questions are important to be asked. And I know a lot of people will be like, "Well, obviously, he's going to feel bad about that play. Why would you ask him a question that's going to make him feel bad?" There's a lot of people who get really upset with journalists who ask those kind of questions. For me, the reason why I think that question needs to be asked is it's like you want to see the reaction of that player to that. It gives you a look at who Dylan Samberg is as a person, and it gives you a look at who Dylan Samberg is as a player when you can ask him about, is it a tough conversation to have? Yeah. Is it tough as a journalist to ask someone about what, may be perceived as one of their worst moments? You're darn right it is. And don't think that it's lost on me for a second what it would be like. I used to have to go, when I worked at the CBC, I used to have to go talk to people who'd lost family members. And I remember the one thing that I would always say, what I did realize was sometimes people want a chance to speak on things. I wouldn't be that kind of person. I'm it may not seem that way with the podcast and everything. I'm an extremely private person. And so I always used to say to people, if they'd lost a loved one and it was a television news story, I would say, listen, here's the deal. It's my job to offer you the platform if you'd like it, but don't think for a second I'm pressuring you to do so. And I just want you to know, if the roles were reversed and you were asking me, I'd say no, because that's just the kind of person I am. Maybe you're that kind of person. And so if you are, say no, and I can walk away. And if you're not, and if there's something that you feel like you need to get out there, I'm here. And 70% of the time, 7 out of 10, it would be people would want to talk, right? So I'm not saying it's that same way in sports, but what I am saying is it's our job to offer a platform, a conduit, a channel to the fans to have that conversation. You know how the Winnipeg Jets feel about their fans. They love them, and sometimes they want to have that conversation. And sometimes a guy like Dylan Samberg wants to be able to address the fans and be like, you know what? It's a bad moment for me, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, so I'm not going to go down that direction. I guess I wanted to give people that understanding from a sports journalist's mindset why you would ask a question that sometimes seems like it's picking on an open nerve. And I'll be honest with you, I do feel sometimes people are trying to pick at an open nerve to get a reaction. And I can tell you this, folks, I'm sure that there would be players out there who would have described me as such in the past. That's not what I'm trying to do, but I'm just trying to give a look in behind why I think you would ask questions about players going through something tough. I think it can be revealing about things they're doing, how they approach that, maybe how they learn from it. Maybe it's a little bit of a look into the future of where that mistake is going to take that player.
Quickly, sorry. I mean, Samberg, Sean, 2 years ago in the series against Vegas, he had a bad turnover that ended up in the back of the net, right? And he was there the next day talking about it. So This is a guy who's been accountable before. And again, I think that the reason that question would also be asked, to your point, I mean, Dylan's the only guy who saw the read, and he's the only one who knew what he saw, and then he's the only one who knew how he had to react after the pass got out in front. So
what he's trying to do,
all of
like
it.
we've broke it
we're
down.
not here saying it's your fault, but
Yes.
he's the only one that can explain what he saw in the play,
Exactly.
and then the mode that you go into after the play gets made.
Exactly. Okay. Gabe Vilardi, your takeaways.
Yeah, I mean, Gabe is such an interesting guy, right? I mean, he doesn't answer in cliches. He's very thoughtful. If he doesn't like the question, he's not afraid to let you know. We had a funny exchange there too. Yesterday, I was trying to get a little bit of clarity on the injury, Sean, and I asked if it was his shoulder or his back. We knew that, his back is something that's bothered him in the past. He said no to the back, but then I said, well, is it shoulder then? And he kind of just gave me the rock eyebrow there. Like
I thought the way I read it, now you were there, but the way that it comes out when he reads is that you asked him if it was shoulder or back, and he was clearly giving you pushback on the ask, but then he said it wasn't the back, which I thought was almost acknowledging that it was the shoulder. Is that the way it read in real time?
No, and when I followed up on the shoulder, and then he's like, he went with the rock eyebrow. He's like, I'm not telling you, basically.
Yes.
And then I found him afterward, and I'm like, hey, I'm not trying to give you any grief. I'm just trying to be accurate. He goes, yeah, I know. But he wouldn't say.
I'll be honest.
Okay.
I'll be honest. I love the way it is. Hey, I'm glad we get to talk about this. I love the way Gabe Vilardi handles the media. He gives you very little. And if you as a journalist, it's your job to ask open-ended questions that open something up for a player. Right. I think you will notice really good journalists ask questions that over and over again lead to really good answers, right? If you ask a closed-ended question or a yes or no question, or if you make a statement to Gabe Vilardi about, that was a pretty nice goal out there, he'll say, yeah, it was. And then he'll cut you. I love it, to be honest with you, because I would say this, if I was teaching a journalism class right now, I would bring up a whole bunch of Gabe Vilardi's interviews and I would show his reaction to some of the questions that are asked. And then I would press pause and I would say to the class, okay, what's the matter with that question? And why did he react in that way? Right. Gabe Vilardi is, I absolutely love it, because you have to ask him a question. It has to be pointed. It has to be structured properly. He does not let you get away with stuff. He doesn't let you just a lot of journalists rely on discomfort. What do I mean by that? Say something out loud and leave it quiet and leave it to the athlete to be uncomfortable as well. And then try and fill that void with noise. It's the radio dead air thing, right? Everyone hates dead air. So when you stop talking and it's the player's turn, usually the players will start to talk. Gabe Vilardi is not susceptible to dead air. You ask him a question like that, he'll answer it and he'll leave the dead air hanging. He loves the dead air. And I love that about him. He's fun to cover. He's fun to ask questions. It's actually one of the things as a journalist I've enjoyed most in the Jets room over the last couple of years. Sorry. Continue.
Sure. And then the other thing about Gabe is that, he was asked about his contract and he's like, I'm going to be honest. I haven't been thinking about it. And then somebody asked to follow up about, well, is term important? What's important to you? If I told you, I'd be lying. So he's like,
yeah,
he needs to see the offer before he's deciding what he wants to do long-term. I mean, I love that about him. I think, again, this is not a guy who's trying to stonewall you. Gabe's a very laid-back individual. He enjoys life. He enjoys his time in California, just like he enjoys his time in Kingston. He's going to have an enjoyable summer. He expects he will be signed. I think it will be a longer-term deal. I think he will be, getting a significant raise, and he's deserving of a raise. But this is the thing I think also about Gabe Vilardi, having talked to him, outside of the scrum too. I sat down with him before the series and, just wanted to get a feel for how he was feeling and coming back. And, he's very honest. I mean, he said, my conditioning is there, but it's hard getting dropped. It's hard getting airlifted. Scott Arniel used the term, you're riding a bicycle. Now you're on an indie track. But I mean, I also love the blunt force honesty from Gabe. Gabe knows that there were a couple pucks in and around his feet that, in the regular season, when he's fully in the rhythm, he probably finds a way to corral it and bury it. I love that about him. He's a guy who holds himself to a high standard. He's not just a guy who thinks it's incumbent upon the coach to put him on the top line, but he knows what he's good at. And he also knows what he needs to improve on, and he's driven to get better. I think he had a great year, but this is also a guy who wants to play all 82, just like Cole Perfetti, Sean. Couple, season-ending injuries, played 82, after the year that he had to go through with the healthy scratches. I still see more upside and ceiling from Gabe Vilardi. I think this is a guy who can be a point-a-game player. I said it going into this year, he would have scored 35 had he not been injured and missed those last 11 games. Even though he was a little bit cold on the goal-scoring front in the 18 leading into his injury, but he's a player the Jets are going to lock down, and again, it's going to be a solid contract. I think north of 6 for him.
Oh God, it better be.
Maybe be 7.
It better be. Okay. I took away from his comments, and to be honest, I had to read the comments. I didn't hear them. But when he says it'll get taken care of in the summer, this is one of these scenarios by which, I don't know, like maybe you need to worry about
he'll be arbitration
or something like that, right? Like I know people are worried about offer sheets. I had some conversations with some GMs, and did I say this on the last show that essentially offer sheets are like, they're just basically, ways to have pissing matches with other teams. Last year, Armstrong was one of the true examples of a GM who looked around and saw a team had over leveraged themselves and could not meet their financial demands in this situation, and went and made an aggressive offer that clearly turned out that in the end weren't aggressive offers. Those players have lived up to those contracts that came in Dylan Holloway and Phil Broberg. But I especially with all the cap space that's out there, all of these people who are talking about RFA offers for Matthew Nyes and Gabe Vilardi and players like that, to me, they're much ado about nothing. I don't think GMs, for the most part, you don't want your player to be offer sheeted, and it pisses you off because you lose your ability to negotiate with your players, which sometimes can lead to good things, right? Like sometimes if you go through a nice negotiation with your players, it can set the table for a good relationship and so on and so forth. And B, you lose kind of control of where your internal cap is. So clearly no GM wants their players to be RFA'd or offer sheeted. But that said, the idea that I think that, there's any kind of danger that someone's going to come in and offer Gabe Vilardi the kind of contract that the Winnipeg Jets can't or won't match, I just don't think it exists. It's much ado about nothing to me. What I hear from Gabe Vilardi is that he's going to let his agent carry the process to make sure he gets paid what he feels he should get paid. But I think that contract is going to take him down the road for a number of years and make him a Winnipeg Jet for a long time. Cole Perfetti, before we move on.
Yeah, interesting hearing him, talk about the growth and the things that he was able to achieve this year. I mean, Cole had a lot on his plate this year, Sean. When you start the year in a contract stalemate and negotiation, and you're not there at the start of training camp, and you're trying to solidify yourself as a second line center, when you've had the coach speak out on your behalf throughout the entire offseason, after going through the healthy scratches that he did down the stretch and into the playoffs for 4 of those 5 games, it wasn't easy. But again, your teammates understand, they know the business component. But for Cole, he started from a point of trying to catch up. I mean, slowish start. I like the fact that he battled through a little bit of a dry spell, found other elements of his game, and then had a great season overall. Really found his game. There's a lot of learning going on, Sean. We talked about this at the end of Game 6. Incredible first round, a little bit quiet offensively in the second round, but that's part of the learning curve. And Sean, that goes back to what you said about Kevin Cheveldayoff's comments. If Tyler Toffoli's not there, maybe Cole Perfetti goes through these growing pains last year against Colorado, and he's even better this year. But again, that's that ifs, ands, or buts scenario. But for Cole Perfetti, the honesty in speaking about, blacking out during the Manitoba Miracle after he scored the second goal and how loud it was in the building. And, we often talk about players at the NHL level. Sometimes, you don't lose that spirit and passion, but to me, Cole sounded like he was that guy on the outdoor rink playing with the older buddies and scoring the goal out there that you dreamed was a Stanley Cup kind of playoff goal. He got to live it this year. And at the end of a, emotional year, that's an important takeaway for him. But I also saw motivated Cole Perfetti knowing that he's going to go back in the summer, and he's got another strong off season to get even better.
Just to the point yours truly is making here, he says offer sheet teams who have bad cap situations. The cap went way up this season, so it's harder to do that. Like this year more than any is probably the year that the whole RFA thing becomes a moot point. Now maybe a couple of weeks from now I'm going to be totally exposed on this take. I don't think so. I think that the RFA thing is a non-issue this year, and most GMs who would be offer sheeting out there are just going to watch the team match that offer sheet, and I don't know what that does for any of the teams involved in that situation. It's why you don't see it happen as often as you do. And honestly, I go back to it. I think you go back, Shea Weber was offer sheeted, and the way that worked was, in the end, he probably was making the kind of money that he should have for the player that he was. But if I remember correctly, it was an $80 million deal. And I'm going to get some of these numbers wrong, but the spirit of what I'm saying is going to be correct. A massive, massive amount of that contract was front loaded, and the effort there was an offer sheet. And was it the Philadelphia Flyers?
Flyers, yeah.
Offer sheeted the Nashville Predators. It was front loaded with the expectation that the owners of the Nashville Predators would not be able to come up with the actual money, because what happened was, as soon as that contract was signed, it was something like half of that contract, $40 million or something like that, had to be paid upon signing. So the effort there was to try and catch a team with financial issues, not being able to find the cash they needed in that week in order to lock down the player. And then a lot of people wondered afterwards, why things went the way they did with the Montreal Canadiens, who had that contract afterwards. That contract ended up being a contract that, yes, it looks like a lot of money on paper because the AAV of it is high. But if you were the Montreal Canadiens, you liked that contract because you were getting a player who was like an $8 million player type defenseman who played that style of game and, clearly did things that worked for you in that regard. And yet you didn't have to pay him anywhere near that because so much of the money had been paid out up front. And the other part of that, Ken, was I think it was $40 million up front. And then it was another big lump sum payment when the second season started, which what it meant was you had to pay him when the contract came out. And then when the full year went around and the next year of the deal kicked in, there was a balloon payment then. So it was something like $60 million within the first year and a day. So what you'll typically see with these offer sheets is there are ways to try and hamstring you financially, obviously, but they're often done in creative ways to try and, put the other team over a barrel. That's how that was tried at that time. It wasn't that the AAV was wrong, is that they were trying to literally guess someone's books and say, we don't think they have the books to do it. With the Oilers, it was their cap situation, and they thought for sure we could catch them hanging like that. But catching teams in a bad cap situation is not as easy as everyone is making it out to be. It's extremely difficult. I don't see any RFAs moving anywhere this year. I see, like I said, Gabe Vilardi sticking around for a long time. I don't have anything to add to Perfetti other than what we've been talking about for a long time. I wanted to touch on a couple other things, though. Before we do that, though, Ken, I just wanted to give a shout out to our sponsors right up and down the list here right now. We talk over and over again about Vittorio Rossi. If you haven't seen the way that they dress us, like, to be 100% honest, I think that they make Ken and I look amazing. I think we are great examples of what you can get when you go down there. We're so proud to have them on board. We're so proud of the way that they make us look. And we send you there because we have strong belief in them. We love the way that we look. I wouldn't go anywhere else. I've never gone anywhere else since I've been in the city of Winnipeg. Thanks to the folks at Vittorio Rossi. And if you want to head down there, make sure you let them know Kenny and Renny sent you and ask for Frankie and the boys, who you'll see some of them at the Kenny and Renny year-ender. Pristine Roofing, another organization. As a former roofer, I can tell you, I've never told this story, but when I sat down and talked with them and kind of understood how they did business, the honesty with which they do business, the way that they are trying to make sure and take all the steps to do their job as perfect as they can. It's not always existent in the roofing industry. I think that they're the cream of the crop, and that's why we send them your way, and that's why you should give give North End Rick a call at 204-981-6289. He's the guy you want down at your place for all your roofing, siding, and exterior needs. You can also call Pristine Roofing directly at 204-237-7663. Just in case anyone thinks I'm wrapping things up here, we've got other topics that we want to talk about on this show afterwards. Some stuff I think you're going to find really interesting. So don't go anywhere. Got to say, we know that Cambrian has already paid off for some of the folks in our chat room who went and got mortgages with them this year. We're really appreciative of that. And again, we're able to pass along customers by name. If you are going and doing any dealings with Cambrian, make sure you tell me and Renny sent you. And hey, if you're looking to pay off high interest credit cards or debt, we suggest you go talk to our friends at Cambrian Credit Union about their payoff loan. They can show you how taking out a loan to pay off our debt actually gets you debt free faster, and you can save thousands of dollars. Go to cambrian.mb.ca to book an appointment online. Sweet Lou Furlan, you want to give them a shout out, Kenny?
You bet. For folks who have realty needs you'd like to have met, contact our main man, Lou Furlan, at Royal LePage Dynamic Realty, 204-791-9971, or at the office, 204-989-5000. His email is lou@loufurlan.ca. That's lou@loufurlan.ca. Lou Furlan, excellent realtor, excellent human being, and excellent supporter of the community, including this podcast.
Okay, Ken.
And the reason I know Lou is because he is my realtor. He found both of my properties that I have purchased.
There you go. Again, there's an emerging theme here for Ken and I. We truly do have strong belief in our sponsors, and it's one of the things that we look for when we do talk with sponsors coming onto the show. Ken, a lot of talk about Jonathan Toews. I want you to talk about your thoughts on him, but also what you think Kevin Cheveldayoff's list of must-dos are this summer. If this team is going to become the Stanley Cup champion they see themselves as and want to be.
Yeah, I mean, the second line center, I think, is definitely something that, unless they attack it elsewhere, like I said, if they go, with Lowry as a second line center, then you're going to have to add a winger. I mean, you're just going to have to stretch out the depth of this team. I think that, we've talked about the third line a lot. I think there's a chance that Vladislav Namestnikov is moved to the wing, maybe playing alongside Lowry if they get a 2C. Morgan Barron is a guy who's emerged this year. Sean is a talent. I think there's going to be more in the offing for him. I don't know that's necessary. He could be the fourth line center, but I could also see him, in a role higher up the depth chart. But we'll see what happens there. Definitely a top six forward, at least one, and possibly two if Ehlers is departing in free agency. Otherwise, I don't. We'll see about the defense. I think the defense core is improving. We'll see about when Elias Solomonsson is ready. I don't know if he breaks camp with the Jets, but I think he could force himself into the equation before the year is over. How late that is into the season, how early, that's up to him. And the Jets are going to have to get a little bit more offense in that bottom six role. I mean, I know we've talked a lot about middle six and everything else, but that's what I see. I think Jonathan Toews is someone who would help the Jets as long as he can get back to health. I've read a bunch of the stories that were written about his healing journey from Mark Lazarus, who covered Jonathan throughout his entire NHL career in Chicago for The Athletic and previously for the Chicago Sun-Times. Jonathan is someone who I covered at the draft in 2006. I think he is he's a winner. He hates losing. He knows what it takes. He's one of the best athletes ever produced by this province. And that's not why the Jets should sign him. They should sign him because he's won at every single level, dating back to his time playing for Team Western at the U17 tournament, an event where Manitoba generally got left in the dust by the bigger provinces. This is a guy who cares about his community. He's a very driven and motivated individual. One of the things Dylan DeMello said the other day, Sean, is that the Jets don't have a lot of guys who have been to the top, and they're trying to figure this out on their own. Luke Schenn is one of them. Jonathan Toews has won everything at every level. He's played at the highest level, world-class player, quality individual and human being. He has some, he has a connection to Mark Chipman through his time at University of North Dakota. They're both alumni there. I think that provided his body holds up for him, he'll also be a guy that has options in other places, Sean. But I think that he's someone, again, can he be a second line center? I'm not sure, but I would tell you this. I wouldn't bet against Jonathan Toews if he has a comeback and he's expressed his desire to do so. I wouldn't bet against him succeeding. based on how driven he is and what he's accomplished on his resume.
Okay, I'm going to start at Toews. This is one of those scenarios where, I mean, it's a risk. He's 37, right? You know, father time wins all battles. You never know how things are going to respond. He's a player whose body has given him a hard time for a long time. The one thing that I've seen, Ken, though, is in the era where he has been fighting with his body, we've seen him play some of the best hockey of his career. It was hidden in the fact that the Chicago Blackhawks were a bad team when that had happened. But I still always, and this is getting to be a while ago, and we have to acknowledge that, but I still remember him rolling in that one year, and you and I, you know, because we sit on opposite sides of the press box, meeting up at the top during an intermission and being like, he's the best player on the ice. Like, take anyone on either side, Winnipeg Jets, Chicago Blackhawks, Jonathan Toews, who is a question mark because of his health, is still the best player on the ice. I feel like I learned a little bit of a lesson, and yeah, it was a short runway, so we don't know how it's going to look long term. But conversations that I had with Jared Bednar about Gabriel Landeskog. Now, let's make this clear. Gabriel Landeskog is 32 as opposed to 37. It's a much different. So this is a little bit apples and oranges. But the one thing that stands out to me in conversations that I had with Jared Bednar about Gabriel Landeskog was this guy knows his body. These athletes, these superior high-end athletes, understand their bodies better than anyone else on the world does. And so if Gabe Landeskog is coming back, it's coming back because he understands the markers of his own body that would suggest that he can get back to playing how he played. Gabe Landeskog is not coming back to just be another player. He's coming back so that he can be Gabe Landeskog. And if he doesn't think he could be Gabe Landeskog, he wouldn't be trying to come back. That's the words that I heard from his head coach, Jared Bednar. Now, I don't know this for certain with Jonathan Toews, but everything about how Jonathan Toews has conducted himself, everything about any interview I've ever had with him, anything about any player that has ever played with him would tell me he is the exact same as Gabe Landeskog, if not an even higher level of that. I don't think he comes back unless he thinks he can be Jonathan Toews. Now, maybe there's a little bit of a Corey Perry idea to this, right? Corey Perry at one time or another was a Hart Trophy winner in this league. He's clearly not that anymore. And yet Corey Perry has fashioned himself into the kind of player that is extremely helpful to teams that go on Stanley Cup runs. And so far he's doing that again with the Edmonton Oilers. Key player. My take on Jonathan Toews is if he's coming back, it's because he sees the markers in his body that he probably understands better than almost everyone else in the world. Like when you're talking about athletes, you're talking about like not just the 1% out of the top 1% of the 1 percentile of people who understand their bodies. I think he's a player who wouldn't be coming back unless he didn't think he could have that impact. But I think at the very least, what he would be is a Corey Perry style player that brings you all the things you need to have a better dressing room, helps you learn those lessons that you were talking about, Ken. So I think he's a good bet if he wants to play in Winnipeg. Like you said, I could see a team like the Colorado Avalanche having interest in giving him a try as their second line center. There's going to be competition for his services, but the connection to home, the way that he approaches hockey, I think starts to align with how the Jets organization, the family aspect of it, the love aspect of the whole thing. I think he'd be a fit in Winnipeg. And if you can't fix that 2C role, and I don't think you fix it, they can. So then you have to put yourself at risk of fixing it at the trade deadline, because we know the Jets can do that. But what if you run into a trade deadline like this year where the same conditions happen, you can't get it done? That's what happened. They got caught with their pants down this year. Maybe the best solution is to go after a guy like Jonathan Toews, unless there's a UFA centerman who wants to come out there right now, or a trade to be made. And I think those trades are extremely hard to happen. Listen, if the 2C role was easy to fill, they would have done so a long time ago. So I think that Jonathan Toews would be a really good bet. Beyond that, I look towards the rest of the year. I think the Jets need to start evolving their third line. We keep talking about Adam Lowry and how he's, they're using him in more offensive situations. They need to start evolving that, in my mind, the third line into not just the most effective grind out third line. They need to start finding a better mix of players that can score and grind still. Okay, so you need to add those types of players, like, who I bet you would have been really good with the third line in the playoffs? Brad Marchand, the way he's playing.
Agreed.
Player that can grind, a player that can get it done on his own, a player that gives up nothing defensively. So I'm not saying that's easy. I'm using it as an example, but I think philosophically, if you're the Winnipeg Jets and you need to find more depth, well, you look for it at 2C. You're probably going to have to look at it when you replace Nikolai Ehlers if he does decide to leave, but it has to go beyond that. Your third line has to be not just a shutdown force. It has to be one that can contribute offensively. And so I think when you lose guys like Mason Appleton, who I've said has played a very key role on that line for years, but if you want to change and be better, evolve, as Kevin Cheveldayoff was talking about, I think that that's one of the places that you have to do it, have a higher scoring third line, and then leave your fourth line as your true, we're just here to grind it out. But the way that Morgan Barron is playing now, and if he ends up being your 4C, that guy can chip in the kind of goals that we're seeing Sam Steele do right now for the Dallas Stars. So I think that there needs to be an effort to start adding more scoring at that third line level, keep the grind, add to the offensive abilities to it. And then beyond that, the only way I can see the Jets upping, I do agree that the Jets need to get bigger. And I think the only way that you can do that is by trying to go out and find, and these guys aren't easy to find. Kevin Cheveldayoff, if he watched this, would be sitting and saying, okay, yeah, sure, I'm just going to go out and get a Colton Parayko type. Boom, done, right? That's not happening. But if you're looking to upsize and be a harder team to play against defensively, and listen, you talked to Pete DeBoer about how he feels about playing the Winnipeg Jets the last round. He thought that they were tough. But if you want to become more of a grind, I think the one place that you do that is you find a bigger player to replace Dylan DeMello, have Dylan DeMello go and play his excellent brand of hockey on that third pairing, and then you've got maybe Solomonsson by the end of the year in that spot there. But the one thing I like, the Jets to me, from having, almost an ironclad defense, are a 1B, like that top pairing guy who's there to support Morrissey, who's big and strong and mean and hard to play against, and you just can't get to the front of the net against that player. Ken, there was an example, was it you and I who was watching that? There was an example of Cody Ceci either in that Oilers game or in one of the Jets games where a tough player, I actually think it was Gabe Vilardi, was fighting like crazy to get to the front of the net, and Cody Ceci was just standing there, and you weren't getting anywhere. He had the front of the net entirely cleared. Now, how often have we heard the analytics community mock Cody Ceci? And then Cody Ceci's right there in the Cup final last year. He's right here in the conference final this year. Hey, the teams that are getting there are finding value in this player. If you can get a strong player who's able to play off of Josh Morrissey and then use Dylan DeMello, who I think would be brilliant at running a third pairing, that would really add things and strengthen them up. Those are the jobs I think Kevin Cheveldayoff needs to do heading into the offseason. Anything you'd like to add, Ken?
No, I think you got her nailed. I mean, Kyle Connor is going to be the other one we're watching. I mean, I think we talked about it a little bit the other day, obviously dug into that deeply. So I don't think it needs further discussion for the time being. But I mean, there are some big decisions on the horizon for sure. Kevin Cheveldayoff knows this. He acknowledged it during his end of season avail. And as he's already been tackling some of the pending UFAs during the year, like Alex Iafallo, Vladislav Nemestikov, he'll continue to tackle it. And we'll be following along with interest because it's been a fun year.
I wanted to tackle something else before we do go. And before that, I wanted to just give a shout out. Didn't hand out any hot takes, but Flame and Comfort brought the spiciness back to the Kenny and Renny show. We really appreciate them for that. Looking forward to catching up with them at the Kenny and Renny year ender. And we're also excited to see their new showroom when it does open. We know it's going to be one of the most impressive showrooms in Western Canada, and we want to thank them because, because of Flame and Comfort. You don't need your hot takes to keep that warm feeling inside, folks. You can visit Flame and Comfort, and they'll take care of it for you. Wanted to give a shout out to the Kenny and Renny OGs, the Johnson Group, and their Got You Covered award that we hand out. And for us, that's the fans who always are there showing up for us. We really appreciate you. To you, the Johnson Group Got You Covered award, folks. Thank you so much for that. And hey, do you run a small business in Canada? Look to Canada's #1 employee benefits plan, Chambers Plan, to give you a competitive edge. Chambers Plan is the simple, stable, smart choice for over 30,000 businesses countrywide. Visit chamberplan.ca to learn more. Wanted to give a shout out to the Keg. They've been great. They sure treated the Hockey Night in Canada crew great when they were in the city for those first couple of rounds. And boy, oh boy, how generous from them to offer up those $50 gift certificates for every show. Almost all of them, folks, were claimed. Almost all. If you were sitting on any of them, now is your time to do it, folks. But you know that if you go see the Keg, each location finer than the last. It's going to be an absolutely great night. Continue going there, folks, to represent the Kenny and Renny podcast there, and make sure you tell them Kenny and Renny sent you when you do. And then finally, I have to announce the winner from the Lamplighter prize pack of a Frosty Delicious 15-pack of Lamplighter Amber Ale, a Lamplighter hoodie, and a pizza. That goes to of our winners. And what game was the winner from here? That would be Game 3, Round 2, Manny Fran. Manny Fran, you are the winner of the winners, and that means you win the TCB Live Pack, where we are going to be hosting our year-end event at 11290 Kenaston. And we are ready to announce it will happen on July 8th, folks. July 8th is when that's happening. All you folks who reached out to me, that room is near bursting at the seams. All you folks that reached out to me for tickets to be set aside, I've got your names down. If you haven't yet sent me your emails, send them. There's like 3 or 4 people who haven't. If I never got back to you to tell you that I got your name on the list, that means that I probably missed you. So make sure you reach out to me again. This is your last chance. I can squeeze some people into the room, but it's your last chance to reach out. So July 8th, it's a Tuesday. Kenny and Renny year ender. It's going to be great. $25 a ticket. All you can eat pizza and food, salads, great appetizers. Gets you your first beer when you walk in the door. It's going to be an amazing event. We love that event. We love the chance to catch up with all you folks. So again, July 8th, folks, I will be sending out emails to everyone who set a place aside. Last chance to have tickets set aside. Send me now or forever hold your peace, folks. That's it. And Ken, before we go, I wanted to talk one last thing. Okay, right. You got time? A little bit of time? Okay.
Of course.
And it was brought up in the show earlier on. Maybe I can bring it up here. Phyllis talked about the Toronto Maple Leafs. She said, I think it's gross how Toronto fans in their barn were treating the boys at the end of their playoff run. They did get to the second round. The last game was a blowout, but still show some class, people. This dovetails nicely with, I don't know how many people saw it, but Mark Chipman sent out a letter to Winnipeg Jets fans where he said this. Everyone says they've got the best fans. The Winnipeg Jets truly believe that they have the best fans in sports. I truly believe that the Winnipeg Jets do believe that. And I think that the conduct of Winnipeg Jets fans kind of shows that. Now, I want to launch into this topic, Ken, by saying this. The takes where people are saying that the Toronto Maple Leafs can't possibly win because of their fan base, I think are entirely ridiculous. You know, I hate it when people blame things on the fans. I'm always on the side of fans. And hey, if the Toronto Maple Leafs can't win because the pressure is too great in that market, well, you heard from Kevin Cheveldayoff and Scott Arniel. He doesn't know why you're in it if you're not in it to win the Stanley Cup. So if you can't win the Stanley Cup in Toronto because of the fans that pick up the team and move them somewhere else if they can win, if that's truly the case, I don't buy it for a second. But I do think at the same time, fans do play a role. And I've been wanting to ask you this for days, Ken, because if I think about it like this, if you take a look at the Toronto Maple Leafs and how their year went, by pretty much every single marker, you would have to say that the Toronto Maple Leafs had a more successful playoffs than the Winnipeg Jets. And why I say that is because the Winnipeg Jets were taken to the wall, double overtime, miracle needed to get past the 8th seed and the final team to get into the NHL playoffs. And the Toronto Maple Leafs closed out their first round opponent, a higher seed, a heated rival. They did so in 6 games. Now, I know a whole bunch of you people are going to go out there and you're going to say, oh, that's a false equivalency. The St. Louis Blues are a much better team than the Ottawa Senators. I don't know that you can say that, and I have all the respect in the world. You know how I broke down the St. Louis Blues coming into this series against the Winnipeg Jets. Don't sleep on the Ottawa Senators. They're going to be in the playoffs for years to come. They've got a team that's built a playoff-style roster. They're going to be a headache for a long time to come. And then if you move on, now the one area where the Toronto Maple Leafs clearly were different than the Winnipeg Jets is that when they got eliminated in their elimination game, it looked bad. It looked ugly. But may I remind you, that like the Winnipeg Jets, the Toronto Maple Leafs went into the heart of enemy territory against the most proven playoff team in the NHL in the last number of years, went into Florida and beat them soundly and wholly in Game 6 to get it back to their rink for Game 7, where the Winnipeg Jets, yes, they were close against the Dallas Stars, a team that does not have the playoff pedigree that the Florida Panthers have. The Jets weren't able to get it home. You can give me whatever excuses you want, but the fact of the matter is that the Toronto Maple Leafs, by all those measures, had a better playoffs than the Winnipeg Jets did. How do you gauge and explain the reaction that is absolute anarchy for the one and the adoration that comes with the other?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. I mean, obviously, 1967 is a long time, and I'm not making excuses for Leafs Nation. I again, we're not trying to tell fans how to do their business, but I don't think that in this case, don't throw jerseys on the ice during play or at all, for that matter. But I mean, again, Sean, the Leafs have won 2 series since 2004. Core 4 era, that's what the Core 4 era has delivered, and it stretched long before them. So I think that's why there's disappointment. I mean, if Leafs fans are being honest with themselves, I think that Brad Treliving and Craig Berube did a good job this year, a really good job in terms of pushing the group forward. But the group needs to change. There's going to be changes. Again, we're not a Leafs show, but I don't see a scenario where Mitch Marner is back with the Leafs. I think they're going to be changing up their top 6 as well, much like the Jets are going to be making some changes as well. In terms of the Jets, I mean, there's obviously still disappointment for the fan base, but I think also too their ability to overcome one hurdle was important. I mean, I think there's still obvious disappointment because their goal was to win it all, not just to win one round, and that's something that we saw from every single player that spoke, and also from Scott Arniel and Kevin Cheveldayoff, especially Arniel. I mean, like, as you touched on, I mean, if you're not in it to win it, what are you doing here? Basically was the commentary. And I think that's why Jets fans maybe feel a little bit differently. I think there has been a little bit of a woe is me around the fan base after not getting past the first round, since they beat Edmonton in that, swept Edmonton, but 3 games going to overtime. I also think that the personal tragedy element also, I'm not saying it changed the viewpoint, but I think it just put the Jets team spirit on display one more time. So while it was still disappointing for the group and for the team themselves, I would say that how they played in the face of incredibly tough circumstances, I think also gave them a little bit of benefit of the doubt when it comes to the difference in perception from the fan bases. I mean, that's how I view it anyways.
There's a couple points that were made here that I wanted to address. Where do I have it here? Okay. So Running Man points this out, losing 6-1 at home in games 5 and 7 for the Leafs with the question mark. I think what he's trying to say here is like, duh, give your head a shake. And I thought about this. How did Jets fans react after they got run out of St. Louis's building for 3 games? Right? Like, you're trying to make it sound like, well, yeah, the Leafs no-showed for a number of games. The Jets didn't. But if and I'm not saying either is a no-show, but if you are trying to suggest that the Leafs no-showed at crucial moments of the series, the fact that it took the Jets a miracle to get past the St. Louis Blues, would you not put this in the same boat? That the Jets were, I mean, their goaltender gets chased off the ice. To me, this is the same thing. And
but hang on here.
What's that?
I mean, they won their home games. I mean, the it's where you lose, I think, and how you lose, right? I mean, as Roy Mack points out, you got, 2 shutouts against, that may be also the last memory of in the building is a 4-0 shutout when facing elimination, right?
Sure. And then is there no room for showing frustration for, God, we've barely talked about the idea that the Winnipeg Jets failed to register a single road win this play. What would they be saying in Toronto if that happened? Would they be like, well, but they did good at home, right? Like that's not the case. Like, hey, if you want to rip on the Toronto Maple Leafs for not doing well on home ice, that's fine. But then you got to acknowledge the idea that the Winnipeg Jets were the least effective road team in the playoffs.
For sure. Yeah, and I think if people understand that, but the issue, Sean, is that they had the most road wins during the year. It's one of those things that's just kind of weird tough to explain. And I agree. I think that the reason why I think the Leafs took a step forward, even though they didn't reach their goal either, is that they didn't fold in Florida, that they won a game that no one expected them to win. So to me, that is a step forward for their program. Now, it doesn't get your name. It doesn't get you anything other than a participation ribbon, but it is part of the moving forward for them also.
So this is my point, Ken, and you're nailing it here, because I think Winnipeg Jets fans could have looked at this situation and said, there's progress here. We like what we've seen. We like that. Listen, the last time the Toronto Maple Leafs went to the second round, they faced the Florida Panthers, and I believe they lost that series in 5, right? 4-1. They went and took a battle-hardened and very knowledgeable playoff winning team for the Florida Panthers, and an old rival who is quite simply their boogeyman in Brad Marchand. And they took that to Game 7. And keep in mind that they were very, very close in an overtime. Everyone in Winnipeg wants to indulge in, well, if the bounces would have gone this way or that way, we would have been playing Game 7, we would have won, and now it would be us against the Edmonton Oilers. Well, think about the bounces that could have gone the Toronto Maple Leafs way to make that a 3-0 series, right? I guess that's my point, is what you're saying here, Ken, is Toronto Maple Leafs fans are looking at this as tear this whole thing down. They just fired their president of hockey operations. I'm saying right now, if you had the Winnipeg Jets fan base, and maybe it's as simple as this, maybe the Toronto fan base is more demanding than the Winnipeg Jets fan base, because you can sit there and see them booing players, throwing Austin Matthews' jersey on the ice, and Scardy makes the perfect point here when he says the contrast with the Winnipeg Jets fans doing the MVP chant during Helly's troubles. A player who gets pulled off the ice for 3 straight games on the road in the first round, a player, Ken, that it's well known within the fan base has been struggling with his own playoff demons, just like the Toronto Maple Leafs core 4 had for years. The story, well written, can't get it done in the playoffs, goes and has these fall apart moments on the road, and comes back and is greeted by his fan base, not with boos, not with jerseys thrown on the ice, but with resounding chance of best player in the NHL. There's a contrast here. And I guess I just wanted to bring this out and say, perception is everything. And am I saying that there's not problems in Toronto? I'm definitely not saying that. But what I'm seeing in Toronto is tear it down. What I've seen from the Winnipeg Jets over the years is it's not working. We love you guys, and this is the organization to its players. This is the fan base to its players. We love you guys. We're disappointed like you are. We sure wish you could figure this out, but we love you. We got your back, and we think that if you just keep pushing forward, you're going to figure this out. I don't know if I've ever heard that message coming out of Toronto, and I guess it's just my way of saying each fan base is unique and have their own culture. The culture of the Winnipeg Jets is one that the fan base meshes with the organization and its philosophy and love your players, love them to death, love them until they win. That is something to be said, and I just wanted to bring that up because of Mark Chipman's letter. It made me think he's onto something with this. There's a stark contrast there, I think, and I don't think the difference between the two teams is as great as some people would like to make it look. Look, put it this way: if the Winnipeg Jets, if Mark Scheifele's dad hadn't passed away, if the Winnipeg Jets would have gone out and got their butts kicked in Dallas, how many people think that the Winnipeg Jets fan base would have been rioting against them the way that we're seeing in Toronto? I don't think it happens. Are people going to be voicing their displeasure and frustrated? For sure they are, Ken. These are two different things, though, and I just wanted to point out the Winnipeg Jets fan base, what makes them the fan base that they are, what makes them the culture that they are, and how I truly do believe that how the Winnipeg Jets are trying to go about making it to the next level, it's a lot easier for the players and the organization to do it when the Winnipeg Jets fan base responds to that the way that they do.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of lastly to that point, Sean, I mean, look at the appreciation Adam Lowry showed in mentioning the charter that the Jets put together to send players and staff members to the funeral in Kitchener for Brad Scheifele's service today. I mean, I think that's another great example of the two-way street caring in that situation.
Yeah. Okay, that's it. We're shutting it down. This is officially the end of the playoffs, the garbage day, all those kind of things. Kenny and Renny show is always willing and able to do pop-ups when big news happens. So maybe that's a Kyle Connor extension. Maybe that's Gabe Vilardi business. We will be back to do a UFA show. Are we committing to a draft show, Ken?
Yeah, I was talking with Jason Buckley yesterday. We're going to do our best to get something that lines up for all of us.
Draft shows, UFA
Sammy
shows,
usually.
Potential pop-up shows happening, folks. If Nikolai Ehlers decides that he wants to be a lifelong Jet, and if that pitch gets to him. Other than that, though, folks, we would just like to. We know that it's a little bit like, you let the fish out of the pond into the river. You never know how where everyone's going to go and when they're going to come back. We sure hope that as many of you come back to the Kenny and Renny year-ender as is possible. We would love to see you there. Really looking forward to it. Last call. Get a hold of me if you want tickets. Other than that, we just want to say sincerely and tell you how thankful we are, just the chat room and the folks who tune in, who stop us. On my way down to the airport, the season was over. I kind of go into an anonymous mode at that point. And someone at the airport said, "Hey, Sean, how's things going with the home back, or your father-in-law's house back in Lactabani? Where are you off to Dallas?" The investment that you show in us, we never take for granted, and we are so appreciative of it. Thank you. And Ken, I just want to say to you once again, this is just one of the most fun things that I've ever done in my life is this little project that you and I started up a number of years ago and continue to do. I did not one bit tired of it. I'm not one bit tired of it. I love it. I have a lot of fun with it. Thank you for all you do and all the great analysis that you provide.
Thank you, buddy.
Yeah. And that's it, folks. Looking forward to seeing you all whenever we see you. Hopefully for a lot of you, that's at the year ender. Signing off from Kenny and Renny. It's been a slice, folks. Bye-bye.